Baba knows the way. For Joseph Baba Ifa, Baba knows the way. We follow the signs. He walks with the Orisha through sacred lines. He speaks with the ancients. He honors the drum. He carries the wisdom where we all come from.
Oh man, starting off with a round of applause today, huh?
Why not?
Why not? Guys, what's up? How you doing? Our Roots Podcast, Joseph Baba Ifa, you know the deal. Ogbe Tumako, Otinga wo solo, Ache adifa fun ho pele, Omo ala kenyo. How you like that, Phil?
Yeah, that was awesome.
Thank you. That's the prayer from the sign today. We're going to be going over Ogbe Trupong.
Okay, that was awesome.
Yeah.
How's everything been? You been good? Happy Sunday, man.
Everything's good, dog. Every time I'm here with you, man, I don't know, I get like re-centered, re-energized, dog. This studio has been magical for us, man. It really has, dog.
That's great. You know what else is magical? Our membership platform.
Yes, God, it's flawless delivery.
Yeah, so it's really easy to join. Just hit that button directly under our video. It says join, and you have access to 3 different tiers, each tier offering its own separate perks, whether it's extra episodes, discounts on merch, you name it, man.
Hey, family, get in there. You know, if you know somebody that could benefit from it, we want you in there. And take full advantage, man. We love interacting with you guys. We love interacting with everyone. Excited to continue our Ogbe series today. This sign is near and dear to my heart because this is my wife's sign. This is Erica's sign of Hand of Ifa. So Ogbe Tumako has been a huge focal point of study for me. And it's been the most gratifying Odu I've ever studied within Ifa. So I'm very excited to speak about it today. So we're going to delve in. It's got a couple bangers, you know, as far as verses and things like that. It's a very impactful Odu. It's a very powerful Odu, just like all the Ogbes are. But one that definitely is to be understood, you know, in all its intensity and grandeur. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So the verse I just actually prayed right now is a verse that mentions opele, right? So in this, it's pretty ironic. You know, the opele is the chain that we utilize to be able to perform divination, right? But in this sign, opele was looking for a function. He was looking for something to do with himself. He was looking for employment, basically, and he went to visit Orumila. And when Dafa, or King divination, was performed for opele, the Odu of Ogbe Trupong was revealed. Now, mind you, this wasn't the only time that Opele went for divination. Divination was performed for Opele and Baba Yobe. Baba Meji has an SFR verse. I believe it speaks of Peregede, that speaks of Opele as well. All of these Odu speak of it, but Ogbe Trupong is one of them. And Opele was told to perform sacrifice to be able to have stable employment, right? And always have a function. And not only that, but to be prophetic, right? And he did that. And till this day, Opele is utilized to prophesize for all of us, right? King divination is definitely not something that is common or shouldn't be too common. So Opele ended up becoming the go-to option when it came to divination. So when we talk about the Odu of Ogbe Tumako or Ogbe Trupong or Ogbe Tumokpong, Ogbe Tumosung or Sing, it says that the person by nature embodies Opele. They embody prophecy. There's somebody that is going to be able to divine, have immaculate intuition, and be able to serve others through their divinatory skills, and help clarify things for them to make the proper decisions within their life. So that's actually an Ogbe Tumako. Another really great point in this Odu that a lot of people don't know about is this is the Odu where Shango, or one of the Odus where Shango actually performed Ifa initiation as Babalawo. Very common story as well. Shango was looking for something to dedicate himself to. You know, Ogbe Trupong is a Odu of a lot of escapades, a lot of journeys, a lot of adventures where the person goes through a lot of different things in life, trials, tribulations, obstacles that they ultimately overcome. It's an Odu, it's actually where the concept of courage first manifested. Ogbe Tumako's heart is second to none. So Shango arrived at Ifa's feet, and the Odu of Ogbe Tumako was revealed, where Ifa told him he was destined to become a priest of Ifa, right? And initially he was like, what's that? What is this? What's, you know, all these different things. He was involved in other things socially. And, you know, with time, he realized that he wasn't getting the alleviation or progress he was looking for. So he said, hey, I got the money. I'm going to go ahead and, you know, move forward with this, and hopefully it works out. Which, when he did perform his Itefar, Itelodu, the Odu Ogbe Tumako was revealed once more, confirming his decision and solidifying him as an Ifa man. And he was able to, you know, not only that, but become king, reinforce himself, you know, serve his community with judiciousness and wisdom, and everything turned out really great for him. So Ogbe Tumako is an Odu. When it is revealed, it is telling the person that they are meant to go all the way. I mean, the Obes in general have this theme, but Ogbe Tumako, just right off the bat, when you look at Opele or you look at Shango's initiatory process here, you know, the person is meant to be a priest within their respective space. For the ladies, within the Lukumi tradition, you know, Orisha, Ayafa. For the gentleman, Ogbe Tumako is an Odu that says, you know, through analysis, you know, we can identify that somebody might be a candidate for Ifa priesthood here. This is also an Odu that speaks very favorably of the Erindi Logung, or the shells as well. The person is meant to be a factor. They're meant to be a figure. They're meant to be influential in their community, which comes as a byproduct of initiatory rites into priesthood ultimately, right? So Mafere Fun Chango here quite a bit. That's actually why I wore the red polo. Ogbe Tumako, a lot of great stories. In this Odu, it speaks of a king, and the king was sick, and the only way through Dafa that they identified he was able to be saved was by making him a Babalawu, right? Maybe it was Shango, I'm not sure. But everyone was afraid, because to be able to perform Ifa initiation, they needed 4 herbs. This is public knowledge. They needed peregun, right, which is the bayonet. They needed bedolaga, or ewesegun sete, which is purslane. They needed atiponla, which is borhavia diffusa, right? Forgive me in my Latin accent, right? Or atiponla, right? And they needed bledo, or tete, which you know, most commonly is viewed as the callaloo spinach. These were the 4 main herbs to be able to facilitate any Ifa initiation, whether it be from hand of Ifa to Orisha to, you know, Itefa, right? But the issue is to be able to get the herbs, they had to go into the domain of Aroni, right? Who was seen as an affiliate of Osang. He was kind of like the force behind Osang. He was very, very intolerable, and he was very aggressive, and he was very violent, and no one wanted to be killed by Aroni. So the king was dying. The other Babalawos were terrified, and Ogbe Tumako really couldn't stand for that. Ogbe Tumako is a sign where the person, unfortunately, really doesn't have a capacity for fear. Fear is something that, you know, could be acquired with time with them, but by nature they almost have like they have a complex where they really don't fear anything, you know. And as we grow older, we understand the importance of fear and whatnot, but there's things where, you know, you just can't have fear, you have to react. And Ogbe Tumako was very keen on this. So being keen and being judicious and prudent, they performed Ifa divination, and their own Odu of Ogbe Tumako was revealed, which was ironically the sign that came out for the king. So he performed sacrifice, right? And the materials ultimately ended up being a clay pot, water, things of that nature. And they were told to take their sacrifice into the jungle, right? And when they did, they were confronted with Aroni. And Aroni was attacking people with a torch, and he was going to burn everybody that came in there. That's why everyone was so afraid, right? But when Aroni went to attack Ogbe Tumako, Ogbe Tumako didn't have a weapon or anything on him, and his hands were full because he was going to start throwing hands, because that was usually his first reaction to things. And he just lifted up the bowl of water, and Aroni thrusted the torch in there accidentally, thus diffusing the torch. And Aroni, without the torch, really wasn't a sight to be seen. He really couldn't see Ogbe Tumako with the hands. So at that point, Aroni got scared and said, hey, let's renegotiate here. What do you need? He said, well, I need the plants to save the king. I'm going to do Ifa to him. I'm going to direct it, all that. And he said, all right, you can have the plants, but please don't kill me. Actually, I'd like to, be down with you because, if I can't defeat you, I want to join you. And at that point, Orunmila and Aroni and Osang and all these guys entered into an understanding. Part of it was because of fear. Part of it was because of respect. But whatever, Ogbe Tumako was seen as the Babalawo, who was now entrusted, or the Osang priest, being that, he inducted himself through Osang and Aroni's approval to have clearance to go into the woods and get the plants whenever it was necessary for an Ifa initiation. So when Ogbe Tumako came back with the plants and all these different things, he was completely rejoiced. I mean, there was some envy too, because they were like, yo, this guy went over there and handled business when we really couldn't. So Ogbe Tumako directed the Ifa, was elected to be the person to do Ifa, being that he had all the cards or the plants. And the king came with Ogbe Tumako. And, he celebrated his godfather, they rejoiced and all these different things. And the king recognized Ogbe Trupong as the Holuo, or the head priest at that time. And, he's recognized as being fearless. It's the Ifa of courage. So when you look at this, the person is someone that does not avoid obstacles, doesn't avoid confrontation, doesn't avoid excelling. I mean, when we look at life is all about having the opportunity to have courage, having the opportunity to use our strength. And Ogbe Tumako was an amazing example of that, because Ogbe Tumako, in contrast to the other Babalawos heard about Aroni and everybody was shook and all these other things. And Ogbe Tumako was like, bro, I don't see none of that. And confronted, and Aroni backed down, got scared. So till this day, Ogbe Tumako is seen as an Odu that is fearless, right? And it also identifies the four most important plants in Ifa practice, and they're known as the Ako Ewe, or the irreplaceable herbs, right? Peregun, Atiponla, Tete, and Seun Sete, or Papisame, which is Bedolaga, another name for it. But these four herbs are irreplaceable. They're necessary in everything that we do. And ironically, they're pretty common. Like, you can see Atiponla growing out of some cracks. Purslane grows everywhere. The spinach or the tete is all over the place. And the bledo, you'd walk by a bayonet and not know that stalk is really key. And that's actually, it's interesting because there's two types of peregun. The Lukumi peregun is usually the one associated with Ogun, right? Peregun, right? What we use to call Ogun. But there's actually a peregun in Isheshe that's seen as the peregun of Obatala, which is one where they actually use the leaves rather than the stalk. And, it's interesting to see that duality between Obatala and Ogun as well. But the one that is most commonly used in Lukumi is the peregun, or the one that hurts, right? If you touch it the wrong way, it'll pinch you or poke you. But Ogbe Tumako is a very important Odu when it comes to process, right? It's somebody that ceremonially is very versed and really knows the flow and sequence of things, and they become very proficient. It's somebody that's going to work a lot of Orisha, initiate a lot of Orisha. In that regard, they were very prolific. And the herbs, the curanderos, all that thing is here. The Osang initiates, the yerberos, all of that is here. So it's somebody that's going to have a predisposition towards that as well, and should accrue knowledge of plants and process, right? Ogbe Tumako. This Odu, a lot of great patakis. Another big focal point in Ogbe Tumako is Egungun, right? Ogbe Tumako, by nature, is an excellent spiritist, an excellent Egungun priest, somebody that is going to come into trance usually pretty seamlessly, pretty quickly, going to have very effective spirits that work in their court, somebody that desperately needs Egungun as well if they don't. And the reason being is because this is known as the Odu of the impossible. And Ogbe Tumako, once again, was looking for something to dedicate themselves to. This is an Odu of vocation. This is actually the Odu of higher learning, the Odu of the Colosseum, the colleges, the degrees, the prodigies. All of that is here. It speaks of somebody of extreme intelligence and proficiency in whatever they dedicate themselves to. And this Odu, or this Pataki specifically, explains where land development and real estate and investments and all those other things actually manifested. So Ogbe Tumako lived in the jungle, and he was trying to find what to do to dedicate himself to. It's a very outdoorsy sign. If you notice, he was the one who defeated Aroni in the jungle. In this Pataki, he was in the jungle finding himself, what have you. It's very important to meditate and be very holistic here. But one day, he ran into Olofin. And he was like, "Oh, father, what are you doing here?" And he's like, "Oh, wow, my son, how are you, Ogbe Tumako? I'm here, I'm looking at this piece of property, and I really want to develop it to, build my palace, build a town, build houses. I want to develop it, but the thing is I need it done by tomorrow. All the other Obas and stuff like that, they're going to come, they're going to chip in, and, I need it done by tomorrow, and I just can't fathom how I'd be able to do that." Well, Ogbe Tumako said, "I'll make it happen for you. I'll do it." And Olofin said, "You have that kind of manpower? Like, you're that productive?" He was like, "Oh, yeah, I got it." And Olofin was like, "All right, I'll be back in 24 hours. At that moment, Ogbe Tumako realized he had bitten off quite a bit to chew. And he went running to his Ifa priests. And they performed divination, and Ogbe Tumako was revealed, where Ifa said, "Hey, you made a promise that you don't know if you can keep or not, but your best option is to perform sacrifice to Egungun, or your personal Egungun shrine, with a machete, a garabato, and food." Right? These are the key things that need to be next to Ogbe Tumako's Egungun shrine. So, when Ogbe Tumako went to his Ibale Egun, or his Ojubo Egun, his Egungun shrine, he offered these things, and his Egungun, or his spirit, actually presented itself, spiritually. And the Muerto looked at him and said, "What have you done?" He said, "Bro, I told Olodumare, I told Olofin I was going to have this all chopped and manicured by tomorrow. I was going to landscape all of this and make it look nice." And he said, "Well, what do you need me for?" He's like, "There's no way I can get this done in one day." So the Muerto said, "You want me to do the impossible?" He said, "I'm sorry, but yes." He said, "Well, don't ask me for the impossible no more. Ask me for the improbable." He said, "For this to work, I need you to sleep here, and I'm going to leave, because both of us can't leave together." And Ogbe Tumako was like, "All right, I'll stay." So Egungun ate the food. He picked up the garabato and he picked up the machete, and he went out into the jungle. And with those two tools, he completely leveled it, in the most organized and pristine fashion. It looked like Mar-a-Lago. And the next day, when he woke up, Olofin was like, "This is splendid." And Ogbe Tumako had just woken up. He had just come in, what have you. He was dreaming. He thought it all felt like a dream. And he said, "What, father?" He said, "Look at the job you've done." And when Ogbe Tumako looked, it was completely ready to be developed and built upon, and it was pastured and all these different things. And he said, "I'm happy you like it. I finished a couple hours ago. I've been waiting for you, And Olofin was like, "This is very impressive, but now that you've been able to do this for me, I want you to help me organize all this. I want to compensate you, tell us what to do as far as structure, infrastructure, foundation. You know how to do all this." And he said, "Oh, yeah." And from that day forward, Ogbe Tumako always consulted Egungun and attended to Egungun before anything big. But he basically became the first land developer, first real estate mogul, investor, tycoon, however you want to look at it. It was through developing land and landscaping and things like that. This Ifa of the contractors, etc., building materials, Home Depot. But he went back to his Egung, and he always made sure he had those things next to him, and he always made that a priority. So in this Odu, Ifa says, the impossible happens. The person is able to accomplish things that are very improbable. Percentages and probabilities really have no effect on Ogbe Tumako. It is somebody whose Ori is so strong and focused on their goals, and is so aligned with their ancestors and Egung and Ifa and Orisha that, great things happen for them. We just have to make sure that, we don't ask for the impossible. But, Egung really saves the person here and makes things really seamless for them. So real estate and all those things are very great. Home ownership, getting involved in finance, all of those things are very nice here, and they turn out very well.
Well, hold on. So when you say like real estate and finances, is that something that like a career path you should be
Absolutely.
taking into, or are you saying you'll be successful in like doing like buying real estate?
All of it. Every aspect of that industry as far as investments go. I mean, especially from a real estate standpoint, because, if you look at the story, it's basically land development. Like a developer came, he had the money, somebody tore it all down, contracted it out for him, built a neighborhood, and they started, selling lots. You know, so Ogbe Tumako in real estate does extremely well, you know. So it's an Odu that speaks of that, you know, initially. So it's pretty wild that those concepts were even around back then. But Egungun was the real key here. Ogbe Tumako's Egun is, I mean, when you look at it on paper, it's pretty unmatched, because you look at other patakis and other things that, you know, speak of Egungun. You know, it's the one Odu where Egun accomplished the impossible, you know, with very little. But that's just how aligned Ogbe Tumako was with Egungun. So very important deity, very important thing to solidify so that the person just takes off, you know. Ogbe Tumako. In this Odu, it speaks of Orumila. And Orumila was a very well-known Ifa priest. And he was very well regarded and respected. He was loved, you know, his neighborhood, all these things. And he was married to an Orisha, right, his wife. So, you know, she would sometimes go to the supermarket or, you know, whatever was around the marketplace, and she would go buy meat to cook. So she was passing by the butcher stand, and I'll explain why I'm laughing about this. She was passing by the butcher stand to go get meat, and she stood in line. But there were 3 women in front of her. And the butcher saw her and said, "Oh my God, it's Orumila's wife. Please, please, Madrina, come to the front of the line. Your husband is amazing. You've been very amazing. They'll understand, right?" And he gave her 3 steaks, 3 very thick steaks. Let's say they were tomahawks. And, you know, he said, "Please tell your husband I said hello. You know, take this as a gift. We love you. Yeah, you know, enjoy it on us." And she was like, "Oh my God, thank you so much. You know, please, you know, feel free." And she left. But what she didn't realize is that the 3 women that she skipped were the wives of death, sickness, and loss. Iku, Arung, and Ofo. So these 3 women, you know, stood in line, got their steak, all these different things, and they went running to their husbands. And, you know, their husbands were very calm and at home. It's ironic because someone asked me, "Hey, is death a woman or a man?" Depends on the pataki, and this one he was a man. And death comes in all shapes, sizes, and forms. So Death's wife went to Iku and said, "Oh, Mr. Iku, Big Bad Iku, they don't give me any courtesies in the butcher line." Orumila's wife gets there, she jumps to the front of the line, and they give her free steak. Some guy you are. Poof. And Iku was like, "Bro." The same thing happened to Arung, and the same thing happened to Ofo. So the 3 of them met outside because they were all neighbors, and they were like, "Yo, you heard what happened at the market?" It was like, "Yo, Rula is out of control, and his wife, king, you know, yeah." And they said, "We're gonna go visit them, and we're gonna destroy them," because they couldn't deal with what their wives, you know, they were badgering them. So they set out, right? So across the town, Orumila's wife gets home, and she's very proud and happy. She said, "Honey, we're doing great things. Look at these gifts that the butcher gave us. You know, look at these beautiful steaks." And, you know, there was 3 women there, and, you know, he took me to the front of the line. I'm Orula's wife, esto y lo otro. And Orula looked, and Orula was a very prudent guy. And he said, "Anytime there's a public blessing, someone's going to get offended by it." He said, "Give me the steaks." She's like, "Oh, are you going to grill them?" He's like, "No, I'm going to do a bowl with them." She's like, "What do you mean? Those are, you know, these are ribeye." And he's like, No, we're not eating this. I'm telling you, something's up." So he pulls Ifa, and Ogbe Tumako comes out. And it came out that he had to do ebo with the 3 steaks. So when he did the ebo, he had to divide the ebo in 3 and take it to 3 distinct locations. So he went running because the first location was the woods. Then the next location was the corner by his house. And the third location was his front door. So death, sickness, and loss are on the way. And, you know, they're walking through the jungle to make it to Orumila's hut. And they see the first steak. And Loss, or Ofo, looks and says, "Hey, bro, I don't want to kill this guy. I don't got the energy for this. There's a steak here. I'm just going to take the steak and tell my wife that, you know, I killed him." All right. And they're like, "Yeah, whatever." So Death went home with the steak. They make it to the corner. And Arung, or Sickness, is like, "I think I'm going to do the same thing Ofo did. I don't got time for this. She wanted a steak. I'll get a steak. I'll say I took it from him." Death was like, "Yeah, whatever." So when Death makes it to the front door and he's about to bum rush in and kill everybody, he sees the steak at the door. And he's like, "Man, I really don't have a problem with this guy. He does his ebos. Like, I'll just take the steak and take it home to my wife. You know, I don't need to deal with this. I'll just tell her the same thing. So he took the steak and went back home. So the next day was Ifa told Orumila not to leave the house until the sun came up. When he walked outside with his wife, he realized, you know, the steaks were gone. And, you know, he told his wife, he said, you know, the 3 ayewos or the negativities that were coming for us were death, sickness, and loss, you know, so they must have taken it or accepted it. But, you know, from this point forward, we have to be very discreet and not really talk about all our blessings, or, you know, we might not even be able to accept them all publicly because, you know, the jealousy and the envy is far too much. So she understood, and, you know, from that point forward, whenever they did their thing or whatever, they always kept it very hush. And they tried not to accept things publicly or receive too many, you know, courtesies from people because it might offend other people for whatever reason. Even though Orula and his wife weren't doing anything wrong, it was just, you know, it was people were, you know, they were enthused about, you know, the positivity they were putting in the community through their practice. Now, here's a crazy story, Phil. So I get with Erica, right? You know, the first thing I'm like, yo, what's the Odu? So she's Ogbe Tumako, so I start reading. So we're getting together, and you know, I'm like, let's start getting some ebos done from the sign and whatnot, because everything I do to benefit her benefits all of us. So when I saw this ebo, I said, man, this is pretty streamlined. You know what I'm saying? Let me do the ebo of the 3 steaks. You're not gonna believe I did it exactly as the paper said, Phil. The next day, all the steaks were gone.
What?
The one I left in the woods, and it's crazy because when we moved in together, the door was there. And then the corner was there. And then when you turned it right on the corner, the woods was there. And I was like, this is wild. So when I dropped them off the next day, I said, let's stay home, you know, see tomorrow. And I didn't, at that point, we didn't even have a Ring camera. We couldn't afford none of that. And the next day, all of it was gone. And it was very wild, you know. So when you interpret, the beautiful thing about Ifa literature is when you reenact it, getting a similar, you know, response, a similar, you know, effect, right? Literally to walk outside like Orula and see the steaks gone. And mind you, it might have been a cat, it could have been or whatever. But just the fact that it happened within that span, it was wild. So that Odu, or this Odu says, you know, Ifa really relies upon discretion. You know, you might have a lot of blessings, you might have a lot of great things coming your way, and you might have the best intentions, and you might not be arrogant about it or nothing like that, but just you receiving a blessing in front of an enemy or somebody that's envious could bring negativity towards you. Ogbe Tumako was a very pure Odu. They were people that really didn't bother nobody, but for some reason, you know, their blessings bothered others. You know, and to be frank with you, when you kind of look at the story, Iku, Arung, and Ofo were always home doing nothing. They were looking for something easy. So when you look at the Ayewos and how their wives felt about them, it was a reflection of their lack of motivation, ultimately. Where Orumila was very, you know, he was very industrious. He was always working. He was always trying to provide for his home, and he was always living righteously, and his family was benefiting from it. But they did it from that point forward in a very discreet way, because Ogbe Tumako is an Odu that says envy can kill. You know, the person can be so envied that, you know, people are willing to take actions for that, you know. So you protect yourself, you arm yourself spiritually, physically, you know, and you kind of go about your life, you know. But it is a very interesting ebo. There's a Odu where the person has to be very careful in supermarkets, public places of purchase, because, you know, conflicts can arise from them. You know, and this Odu, Ifa says blessings can kill. Like, the person can be so loved and so blessed that, you know, other people just really can't stomach it, you know. So to each their own. This is the Odu where Ire was born. I remember first studying this Odu and talking about it with my godfather. You know, he explained that it was really a very powerful Odu, because there were some old Babalaos who had the concept that when Ogbe Tumako came out, it was automatically Ire. So there have been cases of this, right? Me personally, I don't apply it, but I respect the concept and I understand it. And it comes from this Pataki. In the Odu of Ogbe Tumako, Olodumare was trying to find a way to bring down more than one child at a time. And it was shown, or it was identified, that the border between heaven and earth was going to be a hole the size of a needle that represented the marketplace of Ejibo Mekung, which is a marketplace that's seen as, you know, the border between this world and the next. So all of the Orishas started trying to bring down kids, you know, at a voluminous rate. And they all failed horribly. You know, the kids would die, you know. The one who did the worst, and forgive me, it's nothing personal. Shango, like the paperwork says, Shango did the worst. He tried to throw 1,000 kids on his back, and he was the only one that made it through. So, you know, but Orunmila saw what was happening and said, I'm going to consult Ifa because all these other people are trying to wing it and I don't need to fail. The person who was actually mediating the competition was Odudua. So Orunmila was really trying to make an impression here. Ogbe Tumako speaks heavily of Odudua as well. And he went to some celestial awos. Divination was performed and Ogbe Tumokpong was revealed, where Ifa told him to perform sacrifice, right? And to focus on the number 2, or to only take 2 kids down at a time. And when he did this, he made it through swimmingly. And all of the Orishas were shocked, you know? And Shango was like, oh, but what about 2 is too little. Like, we don't have time for that. We need more. And Odudua said, who are you, sir? He said, my name is Orunmila. He said, okay. He said, you achieved it. You know, everybody else was trying to impress to the point of, you know, audacity, you know, 3 kids, 5 kids, 12 kids. You know, they were dying, and for some reason you chose 2. You chose modesty, you chose humility, and because of it, you're going to be rewarded. You're going to be the Orisha that brings children down from heaven to earth, you know, because you were the one who did it successfully and safely, not only for yourself, but for the children. And he actually blessed Orunmila's hands, where Ogbe Tumako actually has a secret process, which won't be secret now. It's in the literature though. But Ogbe Tumako every morning has to lick their palms, and they say Ashebo, Asheto, Ashebiwa, which means I have the blessing to offer sacrifice, I have the blessing to receive longevity, I have the blessing to make things arrive, right? Which was making reference to the children. And Odudua blessed Orunmila and said, you will be the one to bring destiny as well down from heaven to earth, because if you're bringing the children, you're responsible for bringing their destiny down as well. So the crazy thing about it is there's a huge concept that manifested in this Odu, right? So Orunmila, to be able to do this ingeniously, tied a child to the front and tied another one on his back. And he went and he flew through the hole. It's just a visual that makes me laugh. But because of, you know, you just think of Orula, you know, in his full garb, and he's got 2 kids on him, and, you know, Lord knows if they're crying or not, and he's just going through it. But he made it through. So the literature states that Orunmila represents the toyale, or the sign that came out in the reading, right? The first throw. That's why this Odu speaks of the opele, right? And the 2 children represent the witnesses, or Adele Kang, Adele meaning witness, Kang meaning one, and Adele Meji, which means the second witness. So that's why Ogbe Tumako is known as the Ire, because when Ogbe Tumako came down, it was marked Ire because both of them survived. A lot of people ask me, they're like, Baba, yeah, the Toyale is great, but what about the witnesses? Ogbe Tumako says that we are supposed to pay attention to the witnesses as much as we pay attention to a baby speaking gibberish. Right? Because the witnesses represented 2 babies. Like, they were the witnesses. They were nothing more, nothing less. And what they were the witness of is the Ire, or the Osobo, where Ifa says that the first reading that was ever done by the grace of God came in Ire, because Orunmila was able to bring it down successfully in Ire. So, you know, a lot of people are like, I want the witnesses. You can have them. You paid for them. But I remember when I started my Ifa training, my padrino, based on our lineage and things like that, he had a real tough time with people speaking the witnesses. So what would happen is someone would, like the Mano Orula or whatever, right? And they come with a sign. Now, let's say the brother doesn't know anything about that sign and he doesn't have any literature or anything to substantiate himself upon. He'll speak one of the other 2 signs, right? Now, a lot of the older Babalaos wouldn't allow this to occur. They were real sticklers for this. They were like, oye, et toyale nama. You know, just speak at Sino Salidor, the one that came out. With time and alleviation and based on house to house, things change. But my house was very, very rustic in that regard, where, oye, we speak the Toyale. That is it. And I was like, well, Padrino, can I give you a hypothetical? He's like, sure. I said, what if I don't know anything about the sign? He was like, focus on the prophecy, right? Which is, you know, really what the younger Babalawo does. and say Boruboye Wochiche and congratulations, and use that lack of knowledge that you have at that moment to motivate you to study more so that you know enough about every sign to where if one comes out, you could say something that matters. Singing mental, without coming up with things and pulling them out of your ear. So this Odu is what stipulates that. Because if we overindulge in the witnesses, which are nothing more than just that, witnesses, it can convolute a consult negatively. Now, mind you, the three signs that come out are going to have a common thread from a message standpoint. You're going to find the hilo, but you really, really want to hunker down on the toyale. I've never spoken testigos, and I've never gotten any complaints, Now, to each his own, but it's what I've known or noticed to be the most proficient, and what the best babalawos that I've known to consult have always stuck to, the toyale. Now, you have other concepts where, they say one represents the problem, another represents the salvation, to each his own. But at the end of the day, 98% of the consult should be based on the toyale. Everything else should just be philosophical, right? But this is also an Odu that states why you should not perform more than 2 priesthood initiations simultaneously at a time. So, for example, Ogbe Tumako, it says we were able to bring down 2 children at once, and that was it. Because based on the laws of nature, from a humane standpoint, women have 2 mammary glands, right? Which would be dedicated to each child. Twins, right? So Ifa and Orisha is the same thing. If we have a third one, it could die. Because ultimately the nourishment that a woman can provide, it says that it can only provide it to 2 at the same time, to where they can survive. So that's why Ifas should be done 2 at a time. If you're going to do 2 at a time, if you want to go through that, which is, whoa, you can do 1 or 2 at a time, but you can't do 3. Just like Orisha. Orisha can be done 1 or 2 at a time, but not 3, because 3 was the phenomenon. And this isn't the only sign that speaks of it, because it says the 3rd child died. So if you go back to Ochebara, it speaks of it when Ochung had triplets and Ideu died. This is the Odu that speaks of the Ibeji, the Ibeta, right? Or the Meji, or the twins, or the triplets, where the triplets were seen as a phenomenon because, first off, it was wild. They almost saw it as something going against nature. Not that if you're a triplet, there's anything wrong with that. But it's a phenomenon, and one usually would die in antiquity. Ogbe Tumako is a really incredible Odu because it is the Odu of maternity, right? This is the Odu where women started wrapping children to themselves to be able to stay productive and still take care of their kids. So if you ever look at Africa or indigenous culture or whatnot, you usually see a baby tied to a woman's back if she has something to do. I used to see that a lot in indigenous culture as well. All of those things are here in Ogbe Tumako. Ogbe Tumako is the Odu of breastfeeding, where women first started nurturing humanity. It speaks of the blessing of a mother and how important it is. Ogbe Tumako says when a child cries, a mother cries, and vice versa. It speaks of the excruciating pain that women go through to bring us into this world, and why they're to be respected and honored always, regardless of anything. So all of that is here. It's the Odu of maternity. It's really beautiful in that regard. Ogbe Tumako is an Odu. It's the Odu, like when you read the book, it says it's the Odu of the bandoleros, right? A bandolero is a criminal, right, Phil? Me and Erica have this joke because my sign speaks a lot about criminality as well. Oh, yeah. So we're like in the past life, Bonnie and Clyde. You know what I'm saying? So, but Ogbe Tumako was pretty wild because it speaks of a story where Orunmila arrived in a land. And in that land, there was a mass execution where that was going to occur because, I guess it was still allowed. So Orunmila went running up as a babalawo and said, hey, what are the charges? Why are these people being murdered? Executed? What's going on? And the magistrate was said, this is the worst we have to offer. We got murderers, panderers, philanderers, all of these different things, these are the worst people you could think of. And he said, well, how about this? Let me see if I can change them. This is the Odu of reform. And the magistrate said, well, I don't know if you're involved or this is a plot. So if you can't make a change noticeably, you're going to die too. I'll give you 7 days. And Orula was like, oh, right. So now they thrust him into this cave or this room, right, with these guys, and he initiates them as bawalaos, you know. In some versions, they were already bawalaos who had lost their way, but the common version is that he initiated a bunch of bawalaos, and within those 7 days, at least in the first couple, he was terrified because he's like, bro, I'm trying to get through to these people. They don't want to pick up a book. They don't want to read. They don't want to learn. I'm dead. You know, yo, did you ever see the Family Guy episode where Brian was a at-risk teacher? Remember when he was like the at-risk kids or the really bad kids? Like he was the teacher.
I think so.
In the scene where he's like, "Oh, Captain, my Captain."
Like the Dangerous Minds.
Yeah, something like that, dog. It reminds me of that because he was like, "I'm done for." So they're getting to around day 3 or 4, and Orula put down on him and said, "Yo, we're gonna die." And they looked at him and they said, "Yeah, we're gonna die." He's like, "Y'all want to die?" He's like, "We have nothing to live for. I didn't have a father growing up. This guy's been disadvantaged. No one ever believed in him. That's why we got into anything illegal anyway. You know, that's why we got into gangs. That's why we got into all these different things, because no one ever believed in us anyway. The only thing we had was the street." So Orula said, "You think that because you don't know how powerful what I've given you is. If you could just give this book a chance and these practices a chance, I assure you, you will feel more wanted and more fulfilled than ever before. Please, just give it a chance. We got like 3 days left, bro." And, you know, they were like, "Yeah, we'll try it out." And mind you, this is all like time-space continuum. Like the number 7 here is very metaphorical. So on the 7th day, when they all came, you know, and they were all getting done and whatnot, they say that the magistrate came to execute everybody. And he said, "I've come for the criminals." And Orula looked at them and said, "You know, I don't know any criminals. All I know is, or all I see is studious men." And when the magistrate looked in, he saw one guy throwing the chain, he saw another guy reading, he saw another guy preparing akoshe, another guy pulling iking. Like, it was a wild scene. He's like, "Oh my God, you did it. You made them all bawalaos." He's like, yeah, we did it, you know, so we're good, right? He's like, "Yeah, we're good." So Orula goes up to them and says, "My sons, I'm very proud of you, but I'm out. I'm gone." And they said, No. You've given us a new lease on life. We need you, please. Like, we want to keep learning." He said, "Well, you're going to have to learn with somebody else because I got to continue my pilgrimage now. I've given you everything you need to continue learning. You know the fundamentals. You know what's real. You know what's not. You know what I'm saying? Make me proud, you know." And Rumila continued his pilgrimage, and the 16 men that he initiated became the 16 lands of Ifa. You know? This Odu states why people usually don't stay by their godparents' side forever. Now, that doesn't mean that when we separate, it has to be negative, but it is saying that ultimately we have to spread our wings, you know? I'll never forget the first time I directed a Mano Orula by myself. You know, I was like, I don't want to do this. And my godfather, I'll never forget, he said, "You're ready." You know, he completely, he was like, "I'm not going. You got this. You got everything. Click." He said, "Call me after." And we made it through. So Ogbe Tumako speaks of that, you know, where the godparent thrusted the godchild into independence, right? This Odu speaks of reform. This Odu speaks of the immense effect that Ifa can have on any human being, whether it was through the Babalawo initiation, the hand of Ifa, what have you. It was miraculous. Now, the 7 days of the room literally represents the 7 days of creation, where, you know, those 7 days of initiation, it's also one of the Odus why in the Lukumi tradition, our priesthood rites are 7 days obligatory. Whether it's Orisha, whether it's Ifa, you know, and there's other Odus that stipulate that. Osamei speaks of Orisha being 7 days. Oragun speaks of Ifa being 7 days. But Obetrupong speaks of everybody being 7 days. And, you know, it had really jurisdiction and why we can only do 2 at a time. So it's really incredible. You know, I've always said that, and I know you came out with a short about it recently. I said, I learned more Ifa in 7 days at my Yubona's house than I did decades before. You know, so when I read this Pataki and I saw the symbolism there, I'm like, oh my God, you know, that's why it's like the hyperbolic time chamber, man. It's a wild place to be in. Orisha and Ifa. You know, and then apart from that, you know, it speaks of the importance of learning and growing because your elders are not always going to be there. You know, if anything, if we look at raising children and the process, and it's a common thread there, you know, we're ultimately preparing our children to not necessarily replace us, but to fulfill those roles that we provide for themselves. So it's the same thing with spirituality and Ifa and Orisha. Your elders are training you to be able to do everything yourself. Like I tell all my guys, and Erica tells her godchildren the same thing. We don't want to be solicited for anything you could do for yourself. Now, if you have to receive a deity or you need something, you know, possibly coordinated by us, please, you know. But if you could do it yourself, we want to empower you to do as much as you can by yourself, because that's what you've invested for, to be able to have this license, to be able to have an influence over your life and your loved one's life. So very impactful Odu there. And Ogbe Tumako says no one arrives, the majority, no one arrives to Ifa or Orisha with clean fingernails. And it basically says everybody has a past. Everybody is here to grow and elevate, you know, and that's what initiation really is. But it doesn't just come from the 7 days of process. It comes from assimilating what Orunmila left behind through Odu to incorporate into your life for a better tomorrow, you know. I'll bring it full circle with another one.
Okay.
Ogbe Tumako is known as the Odu of la degollación de los santo inocente. It's known as the sacrifice of the innocent, right? There's a pataki here where there was a couple, and the couple, there's versions of this galore, but it's very similar to a biblical account. I just don't remember which one. I don't know if it was Homer or whoever it was. It was the story about the king, forgive the graphicness, was throwing the kids over the wall because he was told in prophecy that there was going to be a baby that was going to be born to replace him, right? Which was ultimately Jesus, right? But we have a pataki that's strikingly similar. Lord knows whose is older. I don't know. But neither here nor there. It spoke of a family that had a baby. And the baby was the destined one to become king. Now, some people say that the king was Odudua, right? And you know, that he was terrified that a baby was going to replace him, because the only way to make a king is by killing a king, you know, or a king dying. So he's like, I'm not trying to go through that. So he sent for the child to be killed, or to be brought to him to be killed. So the mother and father were very scared, so they went running to Orunmila, and divination was performed, and Ogbe Tumako came out for the boy, where Ifa said that they needed to perform sacrifice to Eshu on the four corners of the house. And that Eshu was Eshuni, right? Which is the two-faced Eshu. This concept can also be found in Osalafobeo. And Eshu, you know, said, hey, go in the house, you know, immediately. People are coming here to hurt you guys. I'll protect you as much as I can. But the Ebo was with bows and arrows, right? And, you know, the family was inside. They were terrified. And, you know, there was like a beating on the door and things like that. And Eshu told him, hey, there's people coming in through the front door. Now, this is where it gets really wild. And this is like, you see the AI videos of the babies running around and breakdancing and stuff like that. Yeah. So the baby picked up a bow and arrow and shot it at the guy, or the person who was burglarizing the home, and killed him. And the parents were like, yo. And then Eshuni was like, the back door. And then the kid turned around again and shot another one, right? So when the other guys were looking and stuff like that, and they're seeing their counterparts drop like flies, they got scared and they ran back to Odudua. And, you know, Dua was like, yo, bring them in. Tell them, you know, it's parlay. We don't want no beef, but I need to meet this kid because I can't believe what I'm hearing. So when Odudua met the boy, you know, he looked at him and he realized, you know, it was something greater than him, you know, and he said, you know, this child's a prodigy. This child is meant to lead, you know, and he abdicated the throne and he gave it to the baby, you know. And it's a really wild story. In some versions, Odudua was his grandfather. In some versions, Odudua was the grandfather, but he wasn't the king. And the king himself came to the house, and the kid killed the king, and he automatically became king there. It's a lot of avenues, but the moral of the story is the same. In this Odu, it speaks of prodigies. It speaks of people with a lot of acumen, IQ. Some people say that the baby was Eshu himself, you know, and the spirituality was just Eshuni, kind of like a, you know, an extended, you know, spirituality that was informing them. But there's a lot of interesting things here. Ogbe Tumako is one of the Odus where hypocrisy was born, where the person has to be very careful with hypocrisy and envy and salaciousness and things like that. Like, people want to replace the person and be the person, but they really can't. You know, but when you look, it says that a child was born, it was made for great things. The crazy thing about it is you know, Odudua was the guardian angel of Erica's father, right? And there's versions of the story where Odudua defended the family and the child. And some people say the child was Eshu, and ironically, my oldest son is a son of Eshu. So, you know, you see all those parallels and whatnot. And ironically, my son Danny is a martial artist and things like that. He's into combat sports and self-defense and things of that nature. So the parallels are really wild, you know. And I'll be frank with you, each of my children has something really special about them. You know, prodigy, sure. I mean, every parent thinks their child's a prodigy, but I do notice in them, each of them has something very distinct about each of them. Especially my children of Eshu and this Odu, you know, the children of Elegua were very like intellectual, and you know, they were very smart. Like when I look at my son Danny, how manually intelligent he is, and he builds things and cars and all these things that I'm completely unprepared for. And then my daughter Allie, you know, she's a straight A student, so it's just wild when you look at that. But this Odu says, protect your family, protect your home. Ogbe Tumako actually is supposed to have an arrow or a bow and arrow above their front and back door because of this. This is the Odu of home invasion and burglary and things like that. Be armed, you know, have a security system in place, all these different things. But this Odu speaks of the natural course of life, you know, where the king made the mistake was thinking that, you know, someone replacing him had to be something negative. No, it said that his grandson one day was going to have the throne, which is the natural course of life, you know. My sons are going to replace me. Their sons are going to replace them in due time, you know, just enjoying each other's company until then, because the natural course of life is nothing short of natural. So, Ogbe Tumako, good heavens. It's a beautiful Odu, a really beautiful Odu. It has some intense points, but usually through good character and patience and growth, you know, the person does extremely well. It's been the most blessed sign in my life, you know, what I've been able to accomplish with a woman with this Odu. I can't even put into words. She's my adoration. So it's definitely an Odu that I esteem, and you know, Iborui boy every time it comes out, because it's good stuff. So what do you think, Phil?
Great, man. Very mature Odu there.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so guess what time it is?
Oh, my members.
It's that time, guys. Shall we show some love to the people who show love to us?
Love it.
Join our membership program. Real easy. There's a little button right under the video that says join. Takes you to a magical place where there's 3 separate tiers. Each
Phil,
tier.
you made me spit. Why'd you say a magical place? That was real TV.
Oh,
Forgive me.
I'm not cutting it.
Oh, no. That's horrible. Roll it. Oh, Phil. Look at the beards glistening. Jesus.
I know. All right, here you go.
That's horrible. Here we go.
Okay, so take 2. No. Directly in the video is a join button. Click it, takes you to a place where we have special perks for you guys. And today we're going to show some love to our premium super fans. This is our second tier, our mid tier.
Nice.
You guys are definitely not mid. We love you all. So here we go, showing some love to Kenya Hutton.
Oh, Kenya, thank you.
Angel Dust.
Okay. Whoa.
Yeah. Johnny Washington.
Very nice.
Joseph Gutierrez.
Oh, Joe Boriboya.
Sean Gale.
Thank you.
Jesus Seha.
Boru.
We got Ogbe Suru.
Oh, Boriboya. Obeyono.
We got Titus 1283.
Thank you.
We got Kyle Johnson.
Kyle, what's going on?
We got Jay Palacio.
Boriboya.
And we got Chula La Bruja.
Okay. Whoa. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Shout out to all the members. If you know somebody that could benefit from it, definitely let them in. Let them know about it. BotanicaCandlesandMore.com is up and running for all your product and service needs. We do ship. If you can't catch us here on YouTube, be sure to listen to us on any of the major platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. A big thank you from all of us here at Our Roots Podcast. And until next time, family, see the light.
See ya.
Baba Joseph showed the past today. Baba knows the way, we follow the signs.